I cannot stand stories that try to fool people. You know what really bothers me? Why is it that in almost every movie, the hero is always good-looking? Does someone have to be handsome to be a hero? If you're not attractive, does that mean you cannot save the day? It is the same pattern in almost every movie. The good-looking one is the hero, and the not-so-good-looking one is the villain. Stan Lee saw this kind of thing coming long before he passed. He knew that Marvel's biggest problem was not a supervillain like Thanos or Doctor Doom. The real danger was the people in charge of his characters, the ones who would change them into something unrecognizable. The Fantastic Four was one of Stan Lee's proudest creations. This team helped launch the Marvel Universe, but now it is just a shadow of what it used to be. The latest reboot failed miserably, and it was more than just a bad movie. It was a warning sign. Stan Lee always believed that stories should feel real and that characters should stay true to who they are. He spoke out against unnecessary changes and rewriting history just to fit a modern agenda. But that is exactly what has been happening. Was he right? Did Marvel ignore its own creator? And is there still time to fix it? Let us talk about it. Not too long ago, Stan Lee told reporters that he agreed with a leaked Sony Pictures email that said Spider-Man should always be white. He explained that they originally created the character that way, and he did not see any reason to change it. He made it clear that instead of changing an established character's background, people should simply create new ones. If you want a different kind of character, then make a new one, he said. I will even do it myself. He compared the idea of making Spider-Man black to making Black Panther a Swiss man. He was not against diversity, he just believed that changing a character's core identity was unnecessary when new ones could be created instead. Stan Lee saw all of this coming long before Disney took full control of Marvel. Before all the reboots, race swapping, and forced political messaging, he warned about it. He built Marvel with characters that felt real, even with their superpowers. He knew what made heroes special, and he also knew what would happen if the wrong people got their hands on them. His words were not vague hints, he made it very clear. If you mess too much with the heart of these characters, you will destroy them. And now, everything he feared is happening. When the Fantastic Four reboot failed in 2015, it was not just another bad superhero movie. It was a sign of something bigger. This was the franchise that started everything for Marvel. It was Lee's first major superhero team, the one that proved comic books could be more than just stories for kids. But the reboot did not respect that legacy. Stan Lee was not involved in the movie. He was not consulted, and he had not even watched it. When he was asked about the film's poor performance and bad reviews, his response was simple. The new Fantastic Four did not do great, and it got a couple of bad reviews. Why? Well, it was probably because I did not have a cameo in it. He said it as a joke, but there was truth behind it. The people who made the movie did not respect the original story. They did not care about what made Fantastic Four special. Instead of capturing the fun, adventurous, and family-driven spirit that Lee and Jack Kirby created, they turned it into something dark and lifeless. Lee also pointed out a bigger issue: Marvel was rebooting its characters too often. He knew that constant reboots were a sign that something was wrong. The question is there still time to fix it? Or has Marvel already lost what made it special? The problem with rebooting superhero movies too fast was not just about Fantastic Four. It was a pattern, and it was only going to hurt superhero films in the long run. If every new version of a character feels completely different from the last, people will stop caring. There is no consistency, no identity, and no real connection to what made fans love these heroes in the first place. But instead of learning from the failure of the Fantastic Four reboot, Marvel kept doing the same thing. They kept changing characters, moving them away from what made them special. Stan Lee understood how important it was to stay true to a character's identity. He had created Fantastic Four and X-Men, and when his publisher saw their success, he was told to come up with another superhero. That is when he thought of Spider-Man. He was excited about the idea, a teenage hero, something that had never been done before. But when he pitched it, his publisher shut him down immediately. That is the worst idea I have ever heard, his publisher said. People hate spiders. You cannot name a hero Spider-Man. And teenagers? They can only be sidekicks. Also, he cannot have personal problems. Do you even know what a superhero is? Stan Lee ignored him. He wanted to get the idea out of his system, so he put Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy and featured him on the cover. The issue became a bestseller. A few weeks later, the same publisher called him back. Stan, you remember that Spider-Man character you and I liked so much? Why do you not give him his own series? And just like that, Spider-Man was born. One of Stan Lee's biggest frustrations was when people changed his characters instead of creating new ones. He was never against diversity, he actually championed it. But he believed that instead of rewriting old heroes to fit modern trends, people should create new ones. When asked about race-swapping characters like Spider-Man, he was very clear. If Peter Parker had originally been Black, Latino, or Indian, that would have been fine. But I do not see any reason to change him now. He was not saying that certain groups should not have superheroes. He was saying they should have their own. Latino characters should stay Latino. Black Panther, for example, should never be changed into a Swiss man. For Stan Lee, a character's identity was not about political messaging, it was about storytelling. Changing the core of a character erases what made them special. Imagine if T'Challa, the Black Panther, was rewritten as a white man from Europe. It would not make sense. It would not fit the world he was built in. That is exactly how Lee felt when people suggested changing Peter Parker's race. He was not against having a Black or Latino superhero, he just wanted those characters to be strong and unique on their own. His frustration went even deeper than Spider-Man. He had strong opinions about keeping original stories intact, and nothing showed that more than his reaction to Gwen Stacy's death in the Amazing Spider-Man comics in 1973. For many fans, Gwen's death was a turning point in Spider-Man's history. It made Peter Parker a darker, more tragic hero. But Stan Lee hated it. "I hate when people change the stories and characters I created," he once said. "I hated it when they killed Gwen Stacy. Gwen was not just another side character, she was supposed to be Peter Parker's future. Lee always imagined her as the person Peter would end up with. The decision to kill her off was not something he ever agreed with. And after Gwen's death, Spider-Man changed. He became more isolated, more consumed by guilt. The hopeful, struggling but optimistic Peter Parker that Lee had created started to disappear. This was exactly the kind of shift he warned about, characters being changed so much that they became unrecognizable. Now, people are talking about X-Men again, especially with the release of X-Men '97. And with that, the same debates about changing characters are coming up once more. Stan Lee saw all of this coming years ago, and he made his stance clear: respect the characters, respect the stories, and create new heroes instead of forcing changes on the old ones. But did Marvel listen? Or have they already gone too far? There is a common idea that X-Men was always meant to be about social justice, race issues, or identity politics. Many people believe it was designed as a symbol for different struggles. But that was never Stan Lee's intention. In a 2007 interview, Lee explained that he was just trying to create an interesting group of characters with exciting powers. He thought it would make the story even better if the public in the comics did not like them. Over time, he started getting letters from fans saying they loved how X-Men tackled bigotry and discrimination. He admitted those themes were there, but they were not his main goal. He was not writing to make a political statement, he was writing a great story. The idea of mutants had nothing to do with activism. Lee was simply tired of coming up with new ways for heroes to get their powers. Instead of radioactive spiders or gamma radiation, he thought, what if they were just born that way? Even the name X-Men was not meant to send a message. His first name for them was the Mutants, but his publisher rejected it, saying nobody would know what a mutant was. So he changed it to X-Men, tying it to Professor X. It was just a catchy title, nothing more. But today, everything Lee spoke against is happening. Marvel is rewriting its characters, erasing their original stories, and turning them into symbols for modern messaging. The Fantastic Four reboot is a perfect example. Instead of respecting what made it great, they are changing it to fit today's trends. X-Men is also being rebranded as if it was always meant to be a statement on identity politics, even though Lee himself denied that. Across Marvel, Long-established heroes are being changed instead of new ones being created. This is exactly what Lee warned about. His message was simple: respect the original work, tell good stories, and keep the heart of these characters intact. But Marvel did not listen, and now they are paying the price. The heart of X-Men was always the idea that they were different from normal humans, and because of that, the world feared them. They were not just superheroes, they were outsiders. They struggled to find their place in a world that did not fully accept them. This idea was powerful, and it resonated with so many people. When Stan Lee used to speak at colleges, students often told him how much the anti-bigotry message in X-Men meant to them. But that message was never forced. It came naturally from the story. The X-Men were feared, not because they did anything wrong, but because of who they were. That was the core of their struggle, and that is what made them relatable to so many readers. Back in the early days of Marvel, DC Comics had a huge success with Justice League. Seeing this, Lee decided that Marvel needed its own superhero team. That is how Fantastic Four was born. But instead of copying Justice League, Lee wanted to make something different. He did not want just another team of superheroes who were all perfect and always got along. He wanted real personalities, real struggles, and real conflicts between them. Each member of the Fantastic Four was unique. The leader, Reed Richards, was a scientist. He was incredibly smart, but also serious, sometimes too serious. He could get lost in his own thoughts and forget about the people around him. Then there was Johnny Storm, the young, fun-loving guy who just wanted to enjoy life. He was not like other superheroes who were always focused on saving the world. He wanted to drive sports cars, go out, and have fun. The female character, Sue Storm, was not just there to be rescued. She was strong and could fight just like the others. She was an equal member of the team, not just a side character. And then there was the Thing. He was different from all of them. After an accident, he was transformed into a huge, rock-like creature. He was strong, but he also had a rough personality. He was always arguing with Johnny, throwing insults, and getting angry, but deep down, he was loyal and cared about his team. Out of all of them, the Thing became the most popular. Readers loved him because he was not just a hero, he was someone who had to deal with real problems. He did not want to look like a monster, but he had no choice. That made him one of the most human characters, even though he did not look human at all. Lee believed that great stories came from strong characters, not from pushing a message. He built Marvel on that idea. His heroes were not perfect, they were flawed, and that is what made them interesting. They did not always get along. They made mistakes. They had dreams and fears just like real people. That is why readers connected with them so deeply. But the people running Marvel today do not seem to care about that. Their focus is not on storytelling, it is on messaging. They want to make sure every movie, show, and comic sends the right message, even if it means changing the characters completely. Look at what is happening with X-Men. Today, Marvel is trying to rewrite history, claiming that the mutants were always meant to represent specific political movements. But that is not what Stan Lee intended. He created X-Men to tell a universal story about being different and trying to belong. Now, instead of letting that message come naturally, Marvel is forcing it into their stories, and it is turning fans away. The same problem has spread to other Marvel projects. Doctor Strange was supposed to appear in WandaVision, but the studio removed him because they did not want a white male character taking focus. When Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness came out, his role was reduced, and the story was changed to center around Wanda instead. Now, with Fantastic Four, they're doing it again. The entire story is being restructured to focus on Sue Storm while the other three characters are pushed to the side. This is not about good storytelling, it is about making a statement. Marvel used to be great because it told stories that connected with people. It was never about pushing an agenda, it was about creating characters that felt real. That is what made fans love these stories for decades. But now, Marvel is losing sight of that, and it is driving fans away. This is not just another reboot. The way they are handling Fantastic Four is a sign that Marvel is no longer interested in preserving what made their characters special. They are more focused on shaping their stories to fit modern trends than on making them relatable and engaging. Stan Lee spent his life creating a universe that inspired generations. His heroes were not perfect, but that is why people loved them. They fought battles that were not just about superpowers, they were about responsibility, sacrifice, and perseverance. He knew that if Marvel ever lost sight of those values, the stories would stop working. And that is exactly what is happening now. The real question is, does Marvel even care? Are they willing to fix things and return to the kind of storytelling that made them successful? Or are they going to keep pushing in a direction that keeps alienating their audience? What do you think? Is there still hope for Marvel, or is the damage already too deep? Let me know your thoughts. The Fantastic Four reboot is proof of how far Marvel has drifted from Lee's vision. For decades, Fantastic Four was the heart of Marvel, a story about family, adventure, and discovery. But everything we are hearing about the new film suggests that those core themes are being thrown away. The question is, can Marvel find its way back? Or has it changed too much to return to what made it great in the first place? The new Fantastic Four movie is not really about the team at all. It has been rewritten to focus almost completely on Sue Storm. Reports say that the entire casting process was built around her, pushing the other three characters aside. Even worse, leaked details suggest that Reed Richards, one of the most important characters in Marvel's history, is being turned into a joke. Instead of being the brilliant leader he was always meant to be, he is now weak and ineffective. Even his title, Mr. Fantastic, is not used with admiration, but as an insult. This is not an accident. It is part of a larger pattern Marvel has been following for years, breaking down its classic heroes instead of celebrating them. The reason is clear. The studio is more focused on shaping characters to fit modern ideas rather than respecting the original stories. This approach has already pushed away several big-name actors. Adam Driver, who was once a top choice for Reed Richards, turned down the role after reading the script. Margot Robbie, Emma Stone, and Matt Smith also walked away. It is easy to see why. If a movie is written to tear down its own hero, why would an actor want to be part of it? Even John Watts, the original director of the film, stepped away. Rumors say he left because he did not want to be part of a project that was changing the source material beyond recognition. Now, the movie is being directed by Matt Shakman, the same person behind WandaVision, which was also criticized for pushing male characters aside in favor of a female-driven story. With that history, it is no surprise that Fantastic Four seems to be heading in the same direction. But this is not just about one movie. It is part of a bigger trend that has been pulling the entire Marvel franchise down. The recent failures are not because people are tired of superhero movies. It is because they do not recognize the characters they once loved. Captain America: Brave New World is another example. For years, Captain America stood for honor, sacrifice, and resilience. But Marvel's new approach has stripped those values away. When Anthony Mackie, who now plays Captain America, was asked what the character represents, his answer caused an immediate backlash. He said he did not believe Captain America should represent America at all, even though that idea is at the core of the character. Fans were outraged. But more than that, it showed how much Marvel has drifted from what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created. The movie itself has suffered because of this disconnect. Reviews have been harsh, with critics calling it messy, poorly written, and full of forced political messaging. Even media outlets that usually support Marvel admitted that this movie is one of the weakest in the franchise. Instead of making Sam Wilson a compelling Captain America, the writing focuses on making statements. The result? Another box office failure that fans have no interest in. Stan Lee once shared how he almost quit Marvel in the early days. He had been writing regular comics for years, but he felt stuck. His boss, Martin Goodman, believed comics were only for kids or foolish adults. He kept telling Lee to use simple words, add more action, and avoid deep characters. Lee followed those rules, and the comics sold well, but he was not happy. He wanted to write real stories. His wife, Joan, gave him advice that changed everything. She said, "If you want to quit, why not write one comic the way you really want? The worst that can happen is you get fired, but you want to leave anyway." At the same time, Goodman learned that DC Comics had a hit with Justice League of America and wanted a similar book. He told Lee to create a superhero team. That was Lee's chance. He created Fantastic Four, but did it his way. Instead of giving the heroes costumes, he kept them in normal clothes. He always thought, if I had superpowers, why would I wear a costume? I would want everyone to know it is me. I would never wear a mask. That creative freedom led to some of the greatest stories in comic book history. But today, Marvel seems to have forgotten that lesson. It is not about telling great stories anymore. It is about making statements. And that is why fans are walking away. The book was a big success, selling incredibly well. But something funny happened. We started getting tons of fan mail, which almost never happened before. Every letter said the same thing. We love the story, we love the characters, we will keep buying forever. But if you do not give them costumes, we will stop reading. I never understood why, but for some reason, people who love superheroes also love seeing them in costumes. So, I listened to them. This same issue of changing characters in ways that upset fans is happening everywhere in Marvel now. X-Men, a franchise that should always be successful, is being rewritten to fit modern political ideas. But Stan Lee himself said he never created X-Men to make a political statement. Marvel today is trying to change history, claiming that the mutants were always meant to represent certain social movements. This revisionist storytelling is hurting Marvel's reputation. Fans connected with the X-Men because they were outsiders, struggling with who they were. It was a feeling everyone could relate to, not a political message forced into the story. But Disney does not care about the original vision. They are determined to reshape the franchise to match today's cultural debates, whether fans like it or not. This pattern has repeated in movie after movie. Instead of respecting their heroes, Marvel keeps undermining them. Doctor Strange was supposed to appear in WandaVision, but the studio removed him completely because they did not want a white male character taking focus. When Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness came out, it was rewritten to make Wanda the main character, pushing Strange into the background. Now, the same thing is happening with Fantastic Four. The entire movie is being restructured around one character, Sue Storm, while the others are left behind. Marvel became great because it told stories that connected with people. It was not about pushing an agenda. That is what made it special, and that is what is being lost. This is not just another reboot. Fantastic Four is another example of how Marvel no longer respects what made these heroes special. It is part of the same pattern that has led the MCU into decline, pushing away the fans who once loved it. Stan Lee spent his life creating a universe that inspired generations. His heroes were not perfect, they were relatable. They did not just fight battles with superpowers, they struggled with responsibility, sacrifice, and perseverance. He understood that if Marvel lost sight of those values, the stories would stop working. And that is exactly what is happening now. The real question is, does Marvel even care? Are they willing to fix things, or are they going to keep pushing in a direction that keeps losing fans? What do you think? Is there still hope for Marvel, or has the damage already been done?